Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Legal Lunch Bite. Very excited today to have Andrew Hubert on with me. He is the president of North American Strategic Planning. Andrew, you have retooled yourself from China area to Latin America now. You and I have talked before, but really happy to have this opportunity to catch up and hear what you're doing. Do you want to start with a little bit of background? I mean, your story is fascinating on how you started in Asia and now you pivoted to Latin America.
Okay, I'm basically an old China hand. I think it's still appropriate to say. I lived in China for 10 years. Before that, it's a very common, it's a common roadmap. Before that, I was Japan, then Taiwan, brief stint in Hong Kong, 10 years in Shanghai from 2002 to 2012. So I was there for the big move. I was there for the, when China went from being a sort of backwards semi-socialist economy to the beginnings of what we see now. Not quite, but the beginnings. After that, I was Thailand and then Vietnam. I was locked down in Vietnam for COVID. When was it? 2018, Mike Pence went in front of the Heritage Foundation and basically laid out the new strategic competition between U.S. and China. And that is when I decided to start studying Spanish and making the move. So I was studying Spanish in Vietnam during lockdown, and then came to Oaxaca for 2 weeks, 2.5 years ago. And I've been learning about, I've been studying the Mexican economy. I've been talking to other old China hands, nearshorers who are moving their operations from China from China to Mexico, which is a great move, but I'm finding the big competition is still Vietnam and to a lesser extent India. So that comes up in our conversations. One of the things I've been looking at very carefully here is the triangular economy between U.S., Mexico, and China, and I think that's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very curious from your perspective, what are China's goals for Mexico and nearshoring? Because I know I've been there, been to Mexico once a year the last few years, talking to business leaders, lawyers, and so I know it's happening, but you're on the ground. So what is China trying to do with regard to Mexico and recapturing some of the nearshoring?
Let's go big picture and then very quickly move to a focus. Mexico is not China's first choice. Shipping from China to the United States is the first choice. That's what they want to do. They've got excess capacity in China. They've got unemployment in China. They've got a bad economy in China. They would love to be able to just move that capacity directly to San Diego and Los Angeles and into the U.S. market. They can't do that because of the tariffs and because of Biden's restrictions. So Mexico is shaping up as a plan B or a plan C. The other issue with China and Mexico is China's big foreign investment platform right now is BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. And they've been pretty active. They've been very, very active in Southeast Asia. They've been very active in Africa. They're getting more active in Central Asia for another day. They've been active in Latin America except for Mexico. It seems, you're the lawyer, so I want to check with you on this, but it seems that clause, I think it's 3210 of the USMCA agreement, prohibits Mexico from doing business, doing high-level business with a non-market economy. That seems to be enough. That's vague, and people go back and forth on that, whether or not that prohibits Mexico from doing direct deals with China on a state level. But China has been more active on infrastructure with other parts of Latin America, Argentina, Brazil. They're building Peru. They're building a port, the 𝒂𝒗 port. They're building nuclear power plants. They're doing a lot of big infrastructure, the way China likes to do big infrastructure. They can't do that in Mexico, at least not yet. We'll double back to that. So the way they're setting up in Mexico is sort of like a plan B plus. They're setting up private businesses in Mexico. And what they are basically doing is setting up manufacturing manufacturing capacity in Mexico as a platform for export to the United States. So they are here to access the US market. Mexico is trying to be on the fence. The last president, or the outgoing president, we'll call him AMLO, he was not a big fan of the US, and he tried to play one side against the other. He tried to be very clever about US-China relations with Mexico, and that is coming to an end. So going forward, we're going to see a lot more decisions being made about China's presence in Mexico. And now with the possibility of a Trump presidency, that those concerns that the business community in Mexico has about Chinese FDI, under a Trump presidency, that becomes a little bit more of an immediate issue. Biden would be a status quo, everything stays the same kind of situation, where incrementally the Biden administration and the Xi administration and the Sheinbaum administration would work things out incrementally. Under a Trump administration, that's not going to happen. Under a Trump administration, you're going to see a lot of pressure on Mexico to curtail, restrict, or otherwise affect the exports of Chinese companies or of Chinese invested companies from Mexico into the United States.
Excellent. And let's talk in terms of concrete projects. Let's say, how is China investing in Mexico? Is it real estate acquisition? Is it they're doing maquilador? What's the model for these Chinese companies coming in as private companies to do business in Mexico?
That's a great question. Wish we knew. I'm not even sure China knows. Here's what seems to be happening. These Chinese companies are moving in. They're all private companies, but there are a couple of national champions. And I've noticed that some companies are referred to as state companies. Like there's a machine company, a machine tools producer called Linggong, and they just announced a very big investment, I believe it's about $5 billion, a very big investment into Mexico. My first move as an old China ham was to see if this is a state champion like Huawei, or if it's a total independent, like, I don't know, all these smaller companies that are second or third tier suppliers setting up in Mexico, sort of going bandit, going on their own. And there seems to be a new designation of state company where they're with the plan, they're down with the general party plan, but they're not directed by the party. Mm-hmm. So the big project that I'm looking at, when people ask me for a success story or for an indication of what China is doing, I direct them to Hofusan Industrial Park. This is a giant industrial park that we don't really know what's behind it. There's a myth that a furniture maker, the owner of a furniture factory, got on the phone from China, called Mexico and said, I've got to do this. Let's go ahead. Sight unseen, I want to buy all this land. I want to partner with you, which is, of course, very, it strains credulity. It's more likely that this was a state-directed or this was an official or quasi-official move. They set up a massive, massive industrial park just outside of, it's in Nuevo León, just outside of Monterrey, which is about 200 miles from the border, from the U.S. border, and B, the heart of the new auto industry in Mexico. Mexico is like half a dozen Detroits of Mexico, but Nuevo León and Monterrey seem to be winning, especially if Tesla, that's where Tesla is going to be. Tesla is just a 45-minute drive from Hofusan. And that seems to be as official as it gets. Less official, though, what China seems to be doing is just private companies engaging in maquiladora type moves. The Chinese tend, and this is just anecdotal, this is what I've been able to glean from Mexican contacts, the Chinese seem to be trying to save money. They move into established maquiladora areas and there were two big ones. There's the one around on the border that stretches roughly from Tijuana down to Monterrey. So from the Pacific coast to the Gulf of Mexico and Texas. That whole line there, with a small exception, is old school maquiladora territory. The Chinese are moving there, but they're favoring Nuevo Leon. They like Chihuahua because that's where the auto industry is. That's what seems to be the Chinese #1 priority, is accessing the auto industry in Mexico, because that's going to be their big market in the U.S. With the exception of electric vehicles for now. That's off the table because the U.S. is playing the national security card, and they're saying they're not going to allow electric vehicles. There's another section of industry called the Bajío area. Bajío technically means lowlands, even though it's in a mountain valley. And it's just a big, for our purposes, let's draw a map from Guadalajara all the way up to Monterrey, just north of Mexico City. So it looks like a big Z. You know, the industrial zone in Mexico, the industrial zones form roughly a Z shape. So the Chinese seem to be preferring this Bajío area. It was a little bit cheaper. It's getting expensive. It was a little bit cheaper. It was a little bit off the radar. The Chinese prefer to go a little bit outside of town and save money on real estate. What they don't seem to realize is they're going to have to spend more on HR. Now, let's just stop for one quick second, and let me tell you about a strategic challenge that all of us analysts are facing. Between the time, there's no contract manufacturing in Mexico the way we have it in China. In China, if you had, in the old days, if you had an idea for a cool little device, you sketch it out on the back of a napkin, you bring it to Shenzhen, and someone will turn that into a product. Someone will turn that into a production run. That's not a thing in Mexico. In Mexico, you need your own factory. That may change going forward, but so far it hasn't. So the problem for us is, from the time you read the headline about Linggong setting up their giant production facility, you've got to wait 6 months to 2 years before that factory is complete and they're actually producing. So I can tell you the beginning of the story, but I don't know the end of the story because we haven't seen the end of the story. We haven't seen these factories hire people and then start producing output. So for these Chinese companies coming in, the biggest challenge they're facing is the regional content value, which the rest of us know as local content. But because of the USMCA, the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement, or down here we call it TMEC, which is way cooler. Because of TMEC, the Chinese are going to have to source locally. Now, what they're going to be doing, you're going to see companies like Hisense, Linggong, and BYD. They are going to set up, and then they're going to start bringing in all their second and third tier suppliers. That way, they're going to be able to comply with USMCA rules, not just about tariffs, but also about customs. And they're going to be able to access the US market very cheaply. So far, though, we haven't seen how that's going to work out. So that's a big question mark about whether or not the Chinese are going to be able to get over that regional content value requirement, which is about 75% for the kinds of products they want to export to the US. So that's what I'm seeing on the ground. We've got two big classes of Chinese investment: the state-directed, like Hofusan, and then the large, the top-tier companies like Hisense and BYD and Linggong, who are going to bring in their own supply chain. And it's going to be very curious what kind of impact this has on the Mexicans.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's great to hear this from you. We've just got about 30 seconds left. Can you give me your stance on how are the Mexicans receiving this? Is this a positive thing for them? Are they genuinely optimistic, or are they pessimistic, or somewhere in between?
They are naively optimistic. The Mexicans are pretty happy about Chinese investment it's a real estate deal right now. So yeah, they want to buy big properties and they want to pay all the fees and they want to pay a lot of people. So yeah, everyone loves them. What I'm telling Mexicans aren't listening to me, but I'm telling the Mexican side of this is just wait until these Mexican factories start churning out product, and they are they are competing directly with with Mexican manufacturers here in Mexico. So right now, the Mexicans are happy about the Chinese FDI. I don't know how they're going to react to the realities on the ground once Mexico starts producing at full speed. I think there are other conversations ahead.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to catching up with you again in the near future, Andrew. Appreciate your time and certainly fun, and wish you well on your continued adventures in Mexico.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Next time you find yourself in Oaxaca, give me a call, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.